The latest season of Demon Slayer wrapped up earlier this year, and from the looks of the general discourse online, it wasn't very well received. Now, there is a fair bit of honest criticism out there, such as Ufotable's heavier reliance on CGI, incredibly uninteresting support characters, and a distinct lack of best boy Inosuke. However, I've also noticed a bunch of other critics out there who are now making the claim that the only reason that Demon Slayer is so popular is because of the amazing animation the series has produced over its relatively short runtime. This, of course, isn't true. You don't get to be the #1 movie in the box office of 2020, COVID-19 asterisk included, without having a good story behind it. So for this video, I wanted to explore why Demon Slayer has gained the level of popularity it has while taking a look at the latest season and why a lot of people, myself somewhat included, maybe weren't very satisfied with the final results. Also, I know I normally do a deep dive into a show's history, reception, and underlying social themes, but for this video, I just wanted to focus squarely on the storytelling. Is Demon Slayer as formulaic and boring as people are claiming, or is there enough innovation hidden beneath the gorgeous animation to justify the praise it's gotten? So, with no restraint on spoilers for both the anime and the manga, let's find out.
教えてくれ禰豆子人間に戻す方法は
At first glance, Demon Slayer hits a lot of the same narrative beats you'd expect from your typical shonen battle anime. There's a plucky young protagonist whose life gets violently turned upside down when his family is suddenly wiped out by the series' main antagonist. He then sets out on an epic adventure to avenge his fallen loved ones, with an adorable +1 in the form of his recently turned demon sister, Nezuko. Only, if you look real closely, there's a lot of nuance peeking out from beneath those big sweeping generalizations I just mentioned. Yes, Tanjiro is a lot like other shonen protagonists. He has one special unique ability that he will spam the hell out of in order to win every single fight that he's in. He has bona fide badass sidekicks that he must first defeat before any villain of substance, and once he does defeat them, they become his best friends. There's even a series of finishing moves that he has to perfect through multiple training arcs. But as the story of Demon Slayer goes on, we start to see where this series differentiates itself from the other shonen anime that came before it, and honestly, I think the reason Demon Slayer is so popular is because Tanjiro isn't your typical shonen protagonist. See, Tanjiro isn't actually motivated by revenge. Yes, he wants to find the one responsible for the deaths of his family, but his overall goal, his main motivator throughout the series, is to turn his sister back into a human. And it's in this goal we see what kind of person Tanjiro really is. In less talented hands, the manga's author could have made this motivation of turning Nezuko back into a human a selfish one, that he doesn't want to be alone in this world, and from his family's untimely demise, he could have a very real and somewhat justified prejudice against demons, but that's not who Tanjiro is. His motivation to turn Nezuko human again is purely for her own sake. Despite being just 13 years old when the series begins, Tanjiro has a deep and profound understanding of what it means to truly live. He wholeheartedly accepts that one day he will grow old and eventually die, and that one of the reasons life is so beautiful is that it will someday end, that something so fleeting should be treasured, not thrown away. He then understands that since Nezuko is now a demon, she can't age or die of natural causes, and that if he does nothing over a long enough period of time, she'll end up all alone in the world, and that being alone, watching your loved ones pass you by, is a really hard existence, especially if that existence never ends. This perspective of mortality and acceptance of death as a reality even affects another main goal of his, finding Muzan Kibutsuji. Tanjiro doesn't really care so much about avenging his family's murders. It's definitely something he sets out to accomplish, but a bigger part of that motivation is to find Muzan in order to collect some of his blood and give it to Miss Tamio so that she can develop a cure. Tanjiro has an inherent balance within himself, a oneness with the world and people around him. This is even confirmed when we get a sneak peek into his soul during the Mugen Train arc. Tanjiro will always try reason and compassion to end a conflict first, and only uses violence when pushed. He doesn't harbor hatred or prejudices. He celebrates his rivals' victories. He encourages his friends to keep trying without being patronizing. He's not afraid to call someone out when they're being rude, and he pushes people out of their comfort zones with nothing but the best of intentions because he can sense their inner turmoil. He even cries when his enemies, the monsters who have been trying to kill him all season, are dying in front of him. Yes, Tanjiro is lineally and spiritually connected to Muzan's origin, but if you compare it to the likes of, say, Naruto, Goku, or even Ichigo, MCs whose entire plot revolves around how super special awesome they are, Tanjiro doesn't really feel like a typical shonen protagonist. He doesn't have or really need an emotional arc. He goes through a ton of physical transformations, yes, but who he is as a character is already fully realized, which is an excellent foil to not only demons as a species, but to the series' antagonist.
選ばれし鬼あの娘を食って取り込めば私も太陽を克服できる
Muzan Kibutsuji has got to be one of the most menacing villains in recent anime history, and this shows just how good the storytelling is in this series. In my opinion, Demon Slayer does everything right when it comes to hyping up a main villain. Early on in the series, we learned that in this universe we're playing by vampire rules, and that only Muzan can create more demons with his blood. That he was the original demon, and all the others that came after him aren't nearly as powerful. We then see that power in action when a lower-ranking demon who just so happens to have a little Muzan Kool-Aid in their veins disobeyed a direct order and simply spoke his name out loud, exemplifying the sheer amount of ruthlessness he possesses and how disposable he thinks his subordinates are. Something that's only reinforced at the end of Season 1 when Muzan kills all of the remaining lower moons. From the get-go, it is abundantly clear who is at the top of this demon pyramid. Not to mention that everything leading up to the Infinity Castle arc serves the purpose of hyping up Muzan as a nearly all-powerful villain. Let me explain. When Tanjiro completes his training with Urokodaki, he tells Tanjiro about the existence of Muzan. We then meet some low-level demons for Tanjiro to test his newly acquired skills, setting the bar for what an average demon can do. He then meets Miss Tamayo, who explains what the 12 moons are. We then meet a former 12 moon demon, and it's here we, the audience, start to do the math of, well, if this guy is this strong, and he's not even one of the 12 moons anymore, how much stronger are the upper ranks? How much stronger is Muzan? Then towards the end of Season 1, Tanjiro has to face one of the current lower moons, and he barely survives. This arc also serves the purpose of showing off how strong the Hashira are as well. What was all but impossible for Tanjiro is mere child's play for Giyu Tomioka. We then get to see two of these high-ranking powerhouses face off during the Mugen Train arc. This has the added bonus of showing us how nearly impossible it is to defeat an upper moon, something Tanjiro and the gang are barely able to do in the very next season, when we see just how much not only Tanjiro and friends, but a Hashira struggles to defeat someone who Muzan calls worthless, well, we can't help but be intimidated. Like a good shonen battle anime, the seasons escalate and build on top of one another in a very satisfying way. It is power scaling used correctly. That is, until it doesn't.
はじめまして。私は玉子と申すもの。
I think one of the greatest strengths of this series is that it feels incredibly grounded, despite all of the magical powers of the demons and the near superhuman feats of the demon slayers. People react and change their goals based on new information and developments within the story like real people would. The choices made by the characters matter to the overall plot of the series, which is always a good thing in my book. Characters should change the plot, not the plot changing the characters. Even Muzan changes his goals when presented with new information. During the first 3 seasons of the series, he's obsessed with finding the blue spider lily, a flower he thinks will unlock the secret to surviving in the sun, but when Nezuko learns to not die in direct sunlight, his motivation changes to finding her instead because he doesn't need the lily anymore. Another strength I think the series has is that the plot of Demon Slayer doesn't play out like other shonen anime. I know when I first watched the first season, I thought Tanjiro was going to have to fight his way through the lower 6 moons, level up, then fight the upper 6 moons, then fight Muzan himself. That's what shonen anime had trained me to expect, but that expectation gets thrown out the window by the end of season 1. There's even a ranking system within the core that everyone completely forgot about until Inosuke reminded everyone in the middle of season 2. If this were a typical shonen anime, Tanjiro would have made it one of his dreams to make it to Hashira level or become the leader of the core, but nope, climbing the ranks doesn't really interest him or align with his goals in any way. For me, these little differentiations from the shonen formula is what really intrigues me to the series. There are a lot of tropes that I recognize throughout the show, but then the series plays with my expectations of those tropes to create something new and refreshing while still familiar. But that being said, let's talk a little bit more about the flaws of Demon Slayer and why they seem so much more prevalent now than in any other part of the series so far. When it comes to criticism of Demon Slayer, people like to claim that if it weren't for the animation, no one would be talking about this show, and I will admit that the animation is doing a lot of heavy lifting in places, but that same argument can be made for any great anime. Do you really think anyone would still be talking about Attack on Titan, or even One Piece for that matter, if the fight scenes weren't animated so well? No. When it comes to discussing an anime as a whole, you cannot separate the quality of animation from the quality of its story. They are mutually exclusive to one another as parts of the medium. No one watches an anime just for how pretty it might look, just like no one sticks around for a good story when the quality of animation is horrible. And if you don't believe me when I say that, then why did everyone and their mom hate on Boruto a few years ago when this monstrosity first came out? But let's say for argument's sake that it is just an animation spectacle and that without it the story is just basic and unoriginal. I would argue that having a more basic storyline doesn't actually hurt the series. Brandon Sanderson, one of the biggest names in fantasy writing today, makes the argument that people don't really care if they're familiar with the story structure as long as it's done really well. That having a familiar plot with a semi-predictable ending done really well and is really satisfying doesn't hurt the story.
I often say, plot and character, it's a little harder to be really different. Because, actually, it's really easy to be really different. It's just unsatisfying, right? There's a reason that certain plots are done. There's a reason that certain characters are done. Popular fiction in particular tends to go back to the same sorts of stories because they work real well. It's the distinctive flair you put on it that's going to make it work. And setting is where you can go just crazy as long as your character's relatable and it doesn't matter.
So why is it that now of all times, people are saying that Demon Slayer is basic? For me, the 3rd season of Demon Slayer was a victim of its own success. In season 1, we're introduced to this new hidden world of monsters and powers, goals are set, the main cast is introduced, and the overarching plot is set in motion. Then comes the Mugen Train arc in season 2, and holy crap does Demon Slayer step it up a notch. At the beginning of season 2, we start to see the Demon Slayer formula emerge. First, we're going to meet this season's Hashira. They will be a huge jerk on purpose. We then get the location as to where the season is going to take place. There's a bit of cat and mouse happening before the fighting really kicks off. Then it's like 6 episodes of straight up action. Now, where the Mugen Train arc in Season 2 differs from Season 3 is in its power scaling. In Season 2, Tanjiro and the gang are always on the back foot. They constantly have to keep coming up with ass pull after ass pull to not only stay alive, but to come up with the win. No one is left unscathed by the end of the fight, and their victory feels earned. We see just how hard it was to kill an Upper Moon demon, and we celebrate with Tanjiro and company at the end. Now let's compare that to Season 3. Now, I will admit the first and last episodes of the season are the best ones. The direction is amazing, the sheer scale of the Infinity Castle is really put on full display, plus we get a bit of Muzan's backstory, 10 out of 10 episodes. But after that, things start to feel stale. Yes, Tanjiro meets a new Hashira, and yes, he's immediately a huge jerk. Side note, neither Mitsuri or Rengoku have this problem, of course, but they're the exceptions to the rule. And of course, just like in Season 2, Tanjiro ends up in a new location, this one being the Swordsmith Village. Only the Swordsmith Village isn't really interesting. It's a few common buildings, a few hot springs, and a lot of CGI forest. The entertainment district of Season 2 was vibrant, it had personality, not to mention it was culturally and historically relevant to the time period in which this series takes place. The fact that this is a secret village where the inhabitants make the special katanas for the demon slayers should be more interesting than this. How cool would it be if the villagers used the special iron for the swords to make booby traps and fought back a little against the demons? No, the villagers aren't breath users or anything, but they shouldn't have been as helpless as they were. So after Tanjiro meets both the Vape and HelloFresh Hashiras, is there a bit of cat and mouse in the Swordsmith Village between him and the demons like in Season 2 or in the Mugen Train? Not really. I mean, one literally just walks right into the room and then all hell breaks loose. In order to explain the flaws of the fights that precede this episode, I have to go back to what I was saying earlier about power scaling.
俺たちは毎日鍛錬をしながら合間に入るカラスからの指令に従い
At the end of Season 2, in order to beat Daki and Gyutaro, Tanjiro has to grow a Demon Slayer mark, a new feat that hasn't been seen for some time, and he really struggled with the fire-breathing technique that he had yet to perfect. He had to learn how to use this technique sparingly in order to not pass out and die. And in Season 3, he can just kind of do that whenever now. Cool. The abilities and experience that Tanjiro gained in Season 2 actually ends up hurting Season 3 in the worst ways possible, and a lot of Season 3 feels stagnant because of it. Is it a problem that a demon can have more than one body? Yes, but it's not a new concept, and Tanjiro knows how to deal with it using the power of his new Demon Slayer mark. Does the fact that Muichiro is facing off against an Upper Moon by himself bring any inherent stakes? Well, yes, but the solution is for him to grow his own Demon Slayer mark, something we've seen already and in fact done better. If there's no escalation in the level of foe that Tanjiro and company have to face, then the strength and abilities that he gained in the earlier season means that he can now just mop the floor with his opponents, and the story therefore doesn't have enough tension. It also doesn't help that both Muichiro and Mitsuri have some of the lamest backstories of all of the Hashira. Muichiro is essentially Tanjiro minus parents, and Mitsuri, who has some really cool abilities and unique sword techniques, joins the Corps because she got rejected once by the most blind man in all of Japan, apparently. Any of the other Hashira have more interesting backgrounds than these two, and I wish they were here instead. Quick side note, without question, the standout character of Season 3 is Genya. He's everything I want in a Demon Slayer character. He's got tragic backstory, cool and unique abilities, a freaking sawed-off shotgun. He is easily best boy of the season, and I can't wait to see more of him. Yes, Season 3 felt like a rebuilding year in the series, and next season is looking like more of the same, as it's going to be the Hashira training arc and a bit extra from the light novels, but I'm telling you now, if you can make it through to 2025 to the Infinity Castle arc, oh Man, is that where Demon Slayer is really gonna take off. While we're on the subject of flaws in Demon Slayer, let's talk about the ones I personally have with the series, because remember, no piece of art is without flaws, perfection is an ideal to strive for but can never be achieved, and Demon Slayer is no exception.
もういいからさ。
The first big one I have for this, and an actual criticism of the show that I agree with, is that there's just no explanation as to why Nezuko can suddenly survive in the sun. At the end of the Swordsmith Village arc, Nezuko makes the noble sacrifice in order to save the good people of the Swordsmith Village by kicking Tanjiro away from her, knowing that he couldn't willingly leave her behind. It's a heart-wrenching scene where we really feel her sacrifice and how painful both physically and emotionally it was to make that choice to save the innocent people of... Oh, she's fine? Yeah, she's just fine now? No actual sacrifice or coherent explanation whatsoever? It's just a vague letter from Tamayo? No, yeah, that's cool. That's totally what I wanted. This is by far the weakest part of the story within Demon Slayer. Now, I will admit that Nezuko being able to survive sunlight does act as the catalyst for the final arcs of the story and forces Muzan to make his final stand against the Demon Slayer core, but the way it comes about feels super convenient. Personally, in my headcanon, the reason Nezuko can survive being in the sun is because she is the first instance of Muzan's blood combining with someone from Yorichi's bloodline, the man who invented breathing techniques and who nearly killed Muzan several hundred years ago. Another criticism I have for the series is that after the Hashira training arc, Muzan just knows where the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters is located. He just knows that now, I guess. Personally, I think the finale of the manga rushes the ending a bit with a few conveniences like this, but I do give it a bit of a pass as I think it really nails the ending. A really good theory I've seen online is that Kaigaku, Zenitsu's fellow thunder breather, knew where the headquarters was and told Muzan after he'd been turned into a demon. Yes, I know there's supposed to be safeguards in place to prevent such a thing from happening, but it's about as cohesive an explanation as I think we're gonna get. The last bit of criticism I have for this series is during both the Infinity Castle arc and the Sunrise Countdown arc. Nezuko, one of the strongest fighters on the Demon Slayer core roster, doesn't get a chance to fight, and is instead turned back into a human. Now, this isn't a huge criticism since it does make sense from a tactical perspective to keep Nezuko as far away from Muzan as possible, since she is the one person he's looking for, and if she's absorbed into him, he then becomes unstoppable. But it definitely feels like a missed opportunity for her own character arc. I mean, she also lost all of her family that night, and she's also been on her own hero's journey learning how to control her powers and do something no demon has ever done before. It just seems like a bit of a waste is all. And that's about all I have to say about Demon Slayer. I think it's a gorgeously animated series with some really iconic characters. Season 4 is going to be pretty chill, I think, and it's not until the season after that is when shit is going to start getting crazy. Let me know what you think of Season 3 in the comments down below. Did you love it? Are you going to give up on the series? Do you think it needed more Inosuke? Let me know. And as always, thanks for watching.